Well, it's confirmed that they lied and said through the British Foreign Ministry that he'd run to Venezuela to destabilize. It's confirmed that he didn't run to Zimbabwe. It's confirmed that that he was not strafing crowds of people, and they were actually armed groups. But we're not saying Gaddafi's a good guy. The point here is we've been told a lot of lies. And as you pointed out, mainline, even BBC, has admitted that the rebels in the East are just grabbing people and lining them up and shooting their political enemies. And so this whole line about, oh, we've got to do this for humanitarian reasons, what's the real reason? You're in the EU Parliament. I mean, is this about a political distraction from what's happening?
Well, you've got to remember that as far as the European Union's concerned, we are in very, very deep crisis over here. Already in the space of the last year, we've had to bail out Greece, whose presence in the euro wasn't working. We've had to bail out the Irish, and we are within days, I would suspect, of having to bail out Portugal, with the bigger worry that the Spanish economy, which is about 7 times the size of the Irish one, may need bailing out too. We're literally running out of money in the European Union to keep this crazy single currency project going. And I think it's been all through the years, a marvellous thing for leaders when they're in real trouble and when public support is waning to head off and have foreign military adventures. And so I do see this as much as anything else as a diversionary tactic, as an attempt to whip up jingoistic support for our boys going into Libya and doing the right thing. And initially, they appeared to have got away with it. I suspect, as you say, because they were telling us a pack of lies. But now, I mean, so much so, when the British Parliament, when the House of Commons had a vote on this, only 13 MPs out of 650 voted against military action. Such was that sort of lemming-like support amongst our politicians for this enterprise. But I suspect that now, today's report that there is a presence of Al-Qaeda amongst the rebels, the reports that actually, both sides have committed atrocities and they will probably get worse as time goes on. I think that politicians that have launched us into this, thinking it'll increase their popularity, if we're going to send in ground troops as well, who's to say we're not getting ourselves into yet another Afghanistan? And I think politically this decision will backfire very badly on them.
Well, I agree with you, but now we have Senator Lieberman and others saying this sets a precedent that any time people rebel in a country, whether it's a good country, bad, whatever, that now the UN will pass a resolution, and in less than 48 hours, the U.S. military was firing cruise missiles, NATO members were dropping bombs, England and France and others. I mean, this is incredible that our Congress, I mean, at least in England, you guys, had a vote on it. Our Congress, I know the UK Independence Party is always talking about how 70+% of the laws that govern England now, you don't even get to vote on in the British Parliament. No. Well, here, Obama didn't even consult Congress when the law says they've got to give a declaration of war, or at least an authorization of force, and our own Congress barely even batted an eye at becoming vestigial or ceremonial. Well,
I mean, you are being very badly let down, aren't you, by your congressmen? I mean, they should be standing up and screaming and shouting. Their job is to represent people. Their job is to represent the democratic will. Their job is to have a check and a balance on the executive. And they're clearly, in America right at the moment, totally failing in their duty. And, this idea that we've got to support rebellions wherever they may be. I mean, is anybody seriously suggesting that if there's a major uprising in Saudi Arabia and the Saudis shoot a couple of hundred, that we're going to start bombing Saudi Arabia? I mean, are we about to launch our own version of jihad against every regime, every Arab state? I mean, it's absolutely insane, and I cannot for the life of me. I mean, we've been in Afghanistan for over 10 years. There is no end in sight whatsoever. I cannot believe that public opinion will put up in Britain, America or France with us getting involved in a whole series of military conflicts across the Middle East. I think the whole thing is absolutely crazy.
Well, you're pointing out how just wild and out of control this is, this new military adventurism, but it's being hailed all over the European papers, U.S. papers, British papers, as the New World Order, that this is the new cover for, I guess, globalist imperialism, is that they quietly finance rebellions. They use Al-Qaeda. They tell us Al-Qaeda's now good, right out of 1984. And now they're saying, yes, rise up against your government and we'll do a no-fly zone. They're openly debating in our news, all over the news channels, how we need to go ahead and attack Syria. I mean, this is starting to look like the makings of bigger than a regional war. This looks like how World War I or World War II started.
Well, yeah, you know, it's odd, isn't it? You never quite know what will catalyse a bigger conflict. What I do know is that, you know, when World War I started and World War II started, the massive populations in the countries supported the basic aims of the war, all right? Now, the point about this is, whatever the media are saying, whatever the mainstream media are saying, whatever our politicians in Westminster are voting for, however much your congressmen bury their own heads in the sand, you know, I've seen, I mean, there was an opinion poll out in Britain this morning that showed 7 out of 10 Britons are very worried about the Libyan adventure and deeply concerned that we shouldn't get ourselves further embroiled. So I just don't believe there's public support for this. And, you know, there comes a break point with this, doesn't there? I mean, governments can get away with a hell of a lot. They can lie to us, they can rob us, they can do all sorts of things. But in the end, they have to have consent of some kind. Otherwise, what we're going to see are rebellions of our own in our own countries, and people will take to the streets and say, we do not wish to get embroiled in regional or possibly even global conflict.
Well, that's my next point. A member of European Union Parliament, Nigel Farage, former leader of the UK Independence Party in England. Look, we have 30 million illegal aliens in this country. The Marxist Ford Foundation universities do teach the Southwest, bought from Mexico, from Texas to California, is owned by Mexico. There are open calls for rebellion. I know there's giant immigrant populations in Europe that routinely burn large areas to the ground. What would happen under this new UN precedent if they rose up and began burning cities? Would we then see the Russians or the Chinese under the UN who are members come here into a no-fly zone and attack us? Now, obviously that's absurd, but that's the precedent that's being set here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, and I think that, I mean, we have some very large Muslim populations in European countries. Mercifully, the vast majority of them are absolutely peaceful and democratic, but we have got some very dangerous minorities. My feeling is that by going to war in the Middle East, all we are likely to do is to give the extremists an excuse. And so you could see 2 types of demonstration going on in these countries. Firstly, you could see, as you say, Muslim extremists, you know, getting back, and we shouldn't forget that the last time we bombed the Colonel back in the mid-80s, it wasn't very long before a 747 landed on the village of Lockerbie.
Tell you what, stay there. Final segment, Nigel Farage back in just a few minutes. That's the next point I want to cover. The media is saying, oh, Gaddafi may attack us, then they'll use that to take away our liberty.
Everything we've done has been right. So, not a guy who really loves the Brits. As a matter of fact, I'm very against the royal family. They're responsible for killing millions themselves. Yeah. But over in Britain, we still have people. I'd recommend some more homework. Find out who Alan Watt is. Maybe you want to listen and think, you know. Find a man who, you know, can listen and think. But how did you like that? Was it a good show? Go ahead, send me some comments. Send it to the other shows in Sharon Cable, because I don't have an email address. They do. You know, send it to Dr. Karen. Say, hey, can you get that to Dan? You know, maybe send it to the girls, The Money, The Law, and You. Maybe they can send me it. Hey, I got an email. It's for Dan. I'm just kidding. I want you guys to have fun with it. But, hey, with that, I'm going to end with my favorite, and that is, God bless you. God bless your family. God bless this constitutional republic. I say that because our Representative Brian Joyce thinks we're in a democracy. Sometimes you have to help your elected officials. And with that, down with these globalist New World Order banksters who make money on wars, kill people just to make cash. Maybe you want to think of that the next time they tell you they're too big to fail, you have to bail out the banks. We'll let mom and pop die, You know, we'll let the farmer die. You know, we'll put restrictions on everybody and every business. But God knows we got to save those Goldman Sachs bankers because their average bonus was only $430,000. Yes, that's correct. You Goldman Sachs scum, just like J.P. Morgan. Do you ever wonder why the new White House, Chief of Staff, Daley? Isn't that a mob family from Chicago? Oh, yeah, but Daley is now the Chief of Staff of the White House. And he was from, a director at J.P. Morgan. Yeah, so the bankers aren't running the White House, are they? For all you Obamanoids. Oh, my gosh, it killed me when I watched the people buy the logo, buy the thing, change you can believe in, we are change and all this stuff. Yet he hasn't closed Gitmo, has he, all you Obamanoids? No, Gitmo's still open, isn't it? Hasn't gotten rid of the Patriot Act, has he, Obamanoids? He, let's see, didn't get rid of the Patriot Act, yep, still Gitmo going. He increased the amount of troops in the war, sorry to be the bringer of truth, and increased the amount of mercenaries. Remember it was the Brits that used the Hessians against us? Why don't you type in George Washington and Trenton? When he crossed the Delaware, mercenaries. That's what you've turned to? Yet you have a debt ceiling. But you can afford mercenaries, can't you? Just like cruise missiles, because they're humanitarian. Last time I checked Blackwater, let's see, they were down in Katrina, shooting Americans. That must have been humanitarian. You betcha. Because there's a difference between Obama and Bush, isn't there? So anyway, here you are. You're watching The Real Story. You're up late, you're up early, whatever, you're catching the show. And I ask you, where are you going to be as we reach this tipping point where people decide tyranny or liberty? Which side are you going to choose? When you finish watching the show, please shut your television off, go to the mirror, take a good look at the person in the mirror. What do they want for their grandchildren? What do they want for their children, their wife, their spouse, their cousin, their niece, their uncles? I'll ask you again. What side are you choosing? I'll ask that to the Sharon Law Enforcement. I'll ask that to the Sharon Board of Health. When it comes to putting fluoride, a known toxin, in our water, put in by the Germans into Auschwitz and Dachau, I'll ask the Sharon Board of Health, what side of history have you chosen? Maybe it's time you Sharonites start once again, at least the men over there, start becoming men and standing up for your children. Or maybe you Sharonites want your children's genitals to be squeezed and their naked images stored when they go through the airport, because that's true freedom and liberty. Did we learn anything from the Second World War and Hitler? Did you learn anything from Pol Pot? Did you learn anything from Idi Amin? Should I tell you about Stalin? I bet we have some Russian people in the town of Sharon who can come on the show, if they so choose, and let us know what it's like to have a totalitarian state. Why don't we have some Chinese? That's our sister city, right? Sharon's got some sister city in China. Why don't we have some Chinese people come on and tell us how they sold them the one-child policy? How Kissinger went over there and said, well, if you tax them for 2 kids, now we've got the carbon footprint thing. Maybe it's time you learn what eugenicists, who they are. Maybe you follow the money. Maybe you think for yourself. Maybe you do some homework. Once again, God bless you. God bless your family. God bless this constitutional republic. Down with those scum Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, globalist banksters. They're not too big to fail. That'd be the best thing that happened to America. So, thanks for watching.